throw. One-on-one. Davis has it. Touchdown. Carolina wins. Carolina is the Coastal Division champion. Javonte Williams to the left of Howe. He'll send him out into the flat right side. Howe looking, standing tall, lets it go. Man there. Touchdown. Touchdown, Carolina. The pistol. Jackson behind him. Hands off to Jackson. He tried a jump pass, and it's intercepted. Surratt intercepts it. Holy cow, Carolina's going to win. And off to Javonte Williams again. Pops it to the left. Javonte leaps over a man, crosses the 50, trucks over a defender, spins by another. Goodness gracious, he's down to about the 15, and he did absolutely everything in one carry.
Here's the shotgun snap to Aguilar. Drops back. Pressure coming. Aguilar floats it up. Incomplete. No flags. Head on back up the mountain. Carolina wins it in double overtime. Loftus out of the shotgun. Throws to the end zone. Incomplete. Incomplete. The bell belongs to us. Carolina wins it 47-45 in double overtime.
Bernard fields it at the 26. Heading to the far side. Gio at the 35. Gio, he's at the 50. No, he's not. Yes, he is. Gio is going to take it for a touchdown. Are you kidding me?
What's going on, guys? Welcome into another edition of the Heel Tough Blog Podcast. It's your host, Anthony Pagnotta, here with you guys, as always, coming at you on a Friday night. This is actually going to be our new night that we're going to be updating you on everything going on around Carolina football. Unless there's a breaking news story, this will be the night that we will be here ready to go, letting you know about everything that is going on. And we have a packed edition of the show tonight. One of the most loaded shows that I think we've had, especially in an off season, in a long, long time. Bill Belichick officially signs his contract. That's how we're going to start off the night. But you've also got Carolina getting the season opener and conference opener officially set. 21 new players enrolling and joining the team. One guy that is not, that was a part of Carolina's 2025 early signing class. You've got Carolina adding 3 new members to the 2025 class, 3 new members to the 2026 class, and also Carolina's starting to fill out their staff officially. So a lot of different stuff that we're going to touch on here tonight. But as I mentioned, we're going to start out by talking a little bit about Bill Belichick and him officially signing his contract, because I think it was it last week or was it the week before? At this point, it's all running together because there are just so many storylines that have been coming out. But we had the recent report that came out from Jonathan Jones over there at CBS. Of course, the guy that is very tied in with Carolina from his time there as a student. But he had the report that Bill Belichick yet to officially sign his contract. And that started a little bit of an uproar. There were some people concerned that Carolina would be in a sort of legal gray area if there was a team that ended up wanting Bill Belichick. All of that is now gone as Belichick officially signed his contract earlier this week. And so I think the biggest question now is, with him officially signing his contract, does this officially eliminate any concerns that people should have about him possibly leaving? I think, there are a lot of different ways that you can look at this. I do think it's a step in the right direction, but how do you feel about the signing of the contract and what it ultimately means?
Yeah, as we said then, I'll say it now. Not uncommon he hadn't signed his contract. Those legal documents, they take a lot of time to get signed. And the way coaches are, because they want to get to work, they usually sign some sort of other document that allows them to get to work, also get paid while they're working, and they take care of the formality at a later date. He has done everything possible to prove that he's committed to coaching Carolina in 2025 and beyond. And so if you don't believe that, then you're just looking for a reason to not believe that Bill Belichick wants to be here, honestly, because he has not been tied to any job. And there have been a lot open. He took a phone call with Tom Brady when Tom Brady picked his brain about who could he possibly want to potentially hire. And it's odd that they end up hiring Pete Carroll, a guy who's 74 or turned 74 this year, but it was never once reported that Belichick was interested in the vacancy. The Cowboy job's been open now for well over a week. Nothing on that front. That's been the best job that's come open this cycle. So I don't really know what to tell people. Like, I think the guy wants to be here. As hard as it is to believe, the guy wants to coach at North Carolina. And every action that he has done since he got hired says so. And so if you're still sitting here today worried about him not wanting to be here, then you're just a negative fan. And you don't want to believe that a Hall of Fame head coach at the NFL level thinks he can build a winner at North Carolina. Because that's just the reality of how he feels. If he doesn't think he could win, if he didn't think he could succeed, he wouldn't have taken the job. He's not at a point in his career where he's doing this for the fun of it. He's doing it because he loves to and because there's still that competitive fire to win. Carolina impressed him enough to take a risk and come to the college level, but add to his coaching legacy. So my position on that has never changed, and it didn't change after he signed his contract officially earlier this week.
Yeah, I mean, for me, my thing was always that you need to keep yourself from getting overly excited because this is a guy that ultimately wanted to be in the NFL. Like you openly source teams in the NFL before you end up taking the job about where is my value at. That to me is what has always had me scared. And so even when he signed the contract the other day, I was still, there was part of me that said there's still a chance that he could ultimately end up leaving. I had it at 95% that he was going to end up coaching Carolina. Now, I think it is pretty much 99.9% that he ends up coaching Carolina. The only way that he doesn't end up coaching them is if for some reason Jerry Jones goes back, realizes that the move that he is about to make is one of the stupidest moves that he could possibly make in hiring Brian Schottenheimer because he's basically just a yes man, and decides that he wants to go after a legitimate heavy hitter and Belichick is open to it. I don't think that's going to happen at this point. I really don't. I think that's pretty much out the window. The Raiders' job was always the one that concerned me because you had the connection to Brady. You had the original report that Brady reached out to him, and originally it was, hey, what do you want in order to take the job? What would we have to do for you to take this job? And so who knows? Maybe Bill told him at that moment, I'm not interested in that. But because there is no reporting that can tell you exactly what was said on that, that was my reasoning why you could never say he was 100% going to be on the sidelines for Carolina. Because we know, man, ultimately one of his goals, especially after what was said by Don Shula before his passing, which was that he called Bill Belichick a cheater. He said that even if he does pass me, it won't matter because he knows that he cheated. Belichick was apparently very motivated by that, and that's the reason why he ultimately wants to pass him. So we'll see what ends up happening, but I think now it's pretty much reality that he is going to be the coach. And yes, there is a level of surrealness to that, but I do think that if you're still on the fence about it, if you still think there's a chance, then I don't know at this point, because every job in the NFL pretty much is filled outside of Dallas, and it would appear that they are going with Brian Schottenheimer. After that, that's it. There's no other jobs that are available unless for some reason, the Giants were to fire Brian Dable. I don't see anybody else even on the table that could be fired. And I don't think that that's going to happen anyways. Being a Giants fan, it looks like, John Mara is sticking with the guys that he has, and he's trying to move in a different direction. So, yeah, I mean, I think at this point, you have to now finally take a breath and say, this is your head coach. And that feels really good because you see how aggressive he is, how aggressive his staff has been on the recruiting trail. And like I said, we'll get into that here in just a second. But why don't we transition and talk about the schedule that he's going to face, because we now have 2 games that have officially been set by the conference. And so one of them, you've got the date and time. The other one, you get the date and the opponent. We'll start with the season opener. Carolina will face TCU in Chapel Hill at 7:30 on Monday, September 1st. So that means that Carolina gets a standalone game to start out the Bill Belichick era. Shouldn't really be that shocking. I think we all thought that Carolina more than likely would end up getting a game on Thursday, Sunday, or Monday if possible, because you know that this being one of the biggest storylines that college football has ever seen, they are going to want to have that in a standalone window. So it'll be Monday night. Now, the first thing is that we have been here before. Carolina fans very weary of being in prime time. But I think this is going to be interesting with Belichick here, with a lot of people confident based off of his resume as the greatest coach, arguably, in the history of the NFL, now coming to take over a college program. How excited are you that Carolina has a standalone game on a Monday night to begin the season?
Yeah, it just accelerates the excitement. And we knew this was college football. The TV makers were going to find a way to make this happen because the intrigue that'll be around that game. It's not the best matchup of the opening week of the year. Like, there are so many loaded games to start the season. But I think it's the most intriguing because there's just so much unknown. There's going to be a lot of hype, a lot of anticipation. You are playing a power conference program that's, not too far removed from going to a national championship game. And it's going to be Carolina's first time on the stage, really, since they've acted like a big boy football school. And the reality is that with the way that you've invested in this program, you expect to be in this position a lot moving forward. You expect to play in big games, meaningful games, in primetime situations. And so I know as Carolina fans, this program and that spot has not performed well historically, whether it be under Mac Brown, Butch Davis, or whoever was leading the program. But you kind of leave all that in the past because that was just a different mindset around the program. It wasn't a program that was acting like they were ready for big time. It wasn't a program that embraced prime time. They're going to do all that and so much more under Bill Belichick. And so, the Monday night game is always a staple game because it's always, with now that Sunday now has 2 games, it's the only day that has just one game on it. And when we get done watching all the games on Saturday, on Sunday, we'll still be fired up because on Monday night, we know everybody and their mother will be watching Carolina play football. And I don't know how many times we've been able to say that with as much enthusiasm and optimism as I can say that right now.
Yeah, last year against Minnesota on that opening Thursday night, I don't think it quite hit exactly the same. This is going to be wild because everybody on social media is going to be talking about this. This is going to be the event of the first weekend. It's not the biggest game, as you mentioned. It's not the best matchup, but it's probably the game that matters the most when it comes to college football storylines. Every reporter is going to be watching this game. Every reporter is going to be tweeting play-by-plays of this game, talking about what Belichick's doing, how this team looks. We haven't been there before. And so it'll be interesting to see how these guys handle it, man, because this is a group that under Mac Brown didn't really handle it well. Now you're going to have a different mindset around the program, though, and a guy that's been here plenty of times before. I mean, you got to a point where if Jim Nantz wasn't calling the game with Phil Simms, then eventually, I'm trying to think, did Tony Romo ever call games when Belichick and Brady were still together? Probably, right? I think very early in his broadcasting career. I mean, if those guys weren't calling the game, it was almost a shock. If it wasn't, a Sunday night football game, I mean, almost shocking. So he's been there so many times. His staff has a lot of guys that have been there so many different times. And so it's going to be very interesting to see how Carolina handles that. But, I mean, yeah, how could you not be excited about everybody talking about it, about Chris Fowler, Kirk Herbstreit, probably going to be calling that game. You got to think the last time that they called a Carolina game was the ACC title game against Clemson. And the last time they called a regular season Carolina game was the game at the end of the 2020 season against Miami. That's the last time that they called a Carolina game. So for that crew to be calling your game, that's when you know it's huge. And we talked about this too, because we're going to do everything in our power to be at this game. There's a good chance that you're going to have some sort of setup there, whether it is some form of game day, college football live, SVP on location for Sports Center after the game is over. There's going to be something that is going to happen around that game. And when is the last time that you really felt like that in Chapel Hill? That's the thing. This isn't you're starting the season in Charlotte and you have that match. That was a huge matchup. No doubt about it. That was massive starting the season a couple years ago against South Carolina. Game day was there, everything like that. Chapel Hill, you have not felt this since Mac Brown's first time that he was on campus. So this is going to be amazing to watch. Now, the thing that I brought up when I saw this, do you worry a little bit about this fan base showing up on a Monday night? Because we have seen that this is a fan base that gets inconvenienced by the slightest thing. I get it. It is Belichick's first game. You hope that the excitement is enough to get people out. But if there is a fan base that could find a way to disappoint in terms of the amount of people in the stadium, it would be the Tar Heel fan base. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I don't have any worries, doubts about that. Because there's a large section of this fan base that has been dying for what we did when we hired Belichick, which is to invest at football. Because there are some of us, not as many as we wish, that want to win in both and believe that you can win in both. And those people have already done what we've done, which is buy season tickets, made plans to be at as many games as possible. It's a holiday weekend. It's going to be hard pressed to not have that stadium 100% capacity. And I think it'll be the best environment I've ever been a part of. I know for me that it was probably going to be the most I will cheer, the most that I will yell, and probably the most that I will cuss while attending a Carolina football game.
Oh, lovely.
I expect to be, and I expect that to be the same for the other 52,000 people that are in the arena or that are in the building. So, I think this fan base, for the most part, once the hire became legitimate, has responded very positively. And I think you'll see that in a way that they support this team in that season opener because, right now it's who knows how good Carolina is going to be in 2025. I don't know. But if you want to get off to the right foot, you're probably going to need that home field advantage because TCU was an under-the-radar 8-4 team a year ago, and they got a really good football coach. And so if we want to get this thing off with the win, we're going to need a home field environment. So if I can be at that game, which is on a 7:30, and then drive back to Charlotte and get up at 4:00 to go to work, then frankly, there's no excuse. Show up, show out, be loud, be proud, because it's going to be the most unique experience we've ever seen as Carolina football fans, because we've never seen something like we'll be around that game that opening night.
Yeah, and here's the thing: it's understandable if you're somebody that can't afford to go to the game or whatever. It's the thing of if you buy tickets, go to the game. Don't buy them and then say, "Oh, well, it's a Monday. I don't know." No, find a way to be in that stadium because this is going to be one of, if not the biggest game in program history to start out. It's one, as you mentioned, you're going to need a little bit of an environment, man, because TCU, they're coming off a sneaky successful year. They're expecting a lot more next year. I'm not going to say they're expecting to get back to the college football playoff, but they're expecting to be a contender in that Big 12 and, have at least a chance to get back there. So Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I'm not necessarily worried about it. I do think that there are going to be a lot of Tar Heel fans in the building for that. I also think there will be casual observers that will fill the stands as well, to where it'll be a full capacity. But yeah, it should be a great environment. Hopefully, one that rivals the environment that we had back in 2019 in that game against Miami when Carolina came to Chapel Hill the first time with Mac Brown back on the sidelines. That would be really cool. Well, then today we found out that the Tar Heels will face Clemson on Saturday, October 4th. Now, of course, you will this will not be a set time just yet. They're going to wait, see what the records are of the teams, what the matchups look like, and then determine where they are placing these games. But I got to be honest with you. I think that it is hard to believe that Carolina, I mean, even if they were to lose that first game of the season, they should roll in there with a 3-1 record. If they do that, this will be a primetime game as well. Not sure what that means. That could be a 3:30 game on ABC. That could be a 12 o'clock game on ABC. There's going to be a significant channel that will be attached to this game as Carolina takes on the Clemson Tigers. Not a lot of success against Clemson, but the one thing that I will say is, remember the last time that these two teams met in Chapel Hill, Carolina first year with Mac Brown back on the sidelines, true freshman at quarterback. Sam Howell comes within a 2-point conversion of being able to beat Clemson on their home field. That was the number one team in the country at that time too, with Trevor Lawrence. So Carolina nearly pulling a massive upset back then. Can they find a way to get it done this time around against Clemson? Now, here's the biggest thing that I want to know is, do you like the placement of this game? This is the 6th week of the season, for Carolina. They will have gone through all of their non-conference games, and the week before they have a bye game. So they will have, or a bye week. They have 2 weeks to focus on this game. Do you like where this is placed at on the schedule, or would you have rather seen Clemson, who we knew we were going to have to play, rather seen them later in the season when maybe they're a little bit more worn down, although Carolina would be a little bit more worn down?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably best case scenario. It's early enough in the year to where maybe they don't know who they are on both sides of the ball. They're going to be working in a new defensive coordinator. We know Carolina's going to be trying to iron out just everything with Bill Belichick now being the head coach. But you get it at a bye week, so you get two full weeks to prepare, and it's not at the end of the year where you could be facing a team that's found its rhythm, found its groove, or heaven forbid, playing for their ACC tournament or their ACC championship lives or their college football playoff lives. So it's going to be a stiff challenge no matter what. I mean, I think Clemson is going to be, if I had to bet, they're going to be the pick to win the conference next year. They're going to have a Heisman contender at Cade Klubnik at quarterback. And, Dabo, and he found the portal. So there's a lot more optimism that this program is ready to really stay at the level that they've been at over the last decade or so, and what college football is now. So I mean, it is what it is. I think what would be refreshing is we're not going to hear our head coach complain about where they play them. There's not going to be that loser's mentality that you heard from Mac Brown when he openly complained about having to play Clemson the second and final week of the regular season. That's not going to be Bill Belichick's MO. And he's not going to let his players operate that way either. So, it'll be interesting. Carolina played them tough there the last time they came to Chapel Hill. I think it's fair to expect that Carolina will do that again. And it'd be fun to be in the building to see Carolina get a signature win, because that would be one that could really get the ball rolling in terms of success for Bill Belichick on the field after all the success he's had so far off the field in the portal, high school recruiting, and putting together the staff that he promised.
Yeah, that would be one to hang your hat on. There's no doubt about that. If he finds a way to get that done, I mean, you're talking about one of the biggest wins in Carolina history, especially if that team does what it's supposed to do in the early part of the season and comes into that game undefeated. They will be probably at that time a top 5 team, because a lot of people believe they are going to start the season probably somewhere in that 7-8 range. That would be a massive, massive moment for Carolina, a team that, I mean, look, they are not going to come into the season ranked. We know that. Not sure a win over TCU gets them ranked. So that means that Carolina probably will be unranked when they play that game. That would be a very, very significant win for them. And remember, even the last time that Carolina played back last year in Death Valley, Carolina gave them a game. And I think Clemson, they're going to be a little bit different. I do think that Cade Klubnik, towards the end of the season, really started to find himself. That, to me, looks like a playoff team guaranteed next year. But even still, this is not the national title level Clemson team. They could potentially get there next year, but I don't look at this team as dominant number 1 team that just takes over college football. So that'll be a really interesting matchup for Carolina. And of course, we will get the full schedule that will be released on Monday, 9:00, a special on ACC, on the ACC network, and actually ESPN2. So big stuff there for the conference, and you'll get that whole schedule released for Carolina. We'll, of course, break it down for you on the website when that happens. Now let's move to the guys that enrolled earlier this week. Carolina with 21 new guys that enrolled, including 17 transfers and 4 2025 recruits. The 17 transfers, I'll run through them real quick here. Edge rusher Milcart Abu Jowdy. You've got offensive tackle William Boone, quarterback Ryan Brown, safety Coleman Bryson, tight end Connor Cox, cornerback Thaddeus Dixon, cornerback Gavin Gibson, linebacker Kamori House, wide receiver Isaiah Johnson, offensive lineman Christo Kelly, offensive tackle Chad Lindbergh, offensive tackle Miles McVeigh, defensive lineman CJ Mims, wide receiver Jason Robinson Jr., kicker Adam Samaha, safety Peyton Waters, and edge rusher Price Yates. You'll notice the guy that is not there is Daniel King. He will be a guy that will have to enroll with the program in the summertime based off of when he announced his commitment. The 2025 recruits that will be joining Carolina officially: quarterback Bryce Baker, edge rusher Austin Alexander, running back Jeriel Cobb, and defensive lineman Terry Nwabusi Iziela will be joining the team officially. So when you look at that group, I think it just shows you that this is a complete overhaul that Carolina is doing to the roster. We're not talking about Dion levels when he came in there. I think it was like 59 new guys or something like that. You knew that Belichick, being a guy that had not been around college football, same thing with Michael Lombardi, they weren't going to completely overhaul the roster. They didn't know enough about the transfer portal and everything like that to be able to do that. But I got to tell you, I really like a lot of the guys that Carolina's landed. I was incredibly excited about the addition of Thaddeus Dixon. Daniel King is a big addition. I love what they've done with the offensive line. And I think, you look at especially the 2 corners. I think Dixon and then Gavin Gibson, who's going to be your nickel corner. I think Carolina did some really good work here in the portal this time around to get some significant contributors, including, when you look at the 2025 recruits, a guy like Bryce Baker and even Austin Alexander, who may factor in this season. What do you think about the overhaul that we've seen so far from Belichick and this group of guys in the front office and on his coaching staff?
Well, I think while it is, significant, you're bringing in 21 new bodies. The fact that it isn't more, like you have seen in past, when you see head coaching changes now, I think it speaks volumes of the talent that Mac Brown did get into the program, that Bill Belichick, that Michael Lombardi valued. Because I do think if they did not think that these guys that enter the portal, if they didn't think that they could play for them, then they wouldn't have welcomed them back. And there were a handful of guys that they said, okay, you went into the portal, didn't like what you found, or maybe you believed in what we're doing here, you want to come back. Well, we believe in your talent, so we'll let you come back and be a part of what we're trying to do in 2025. So I think that's the one thing you got to look at it. And also, I think you just got to like Carolina, Bill Belichick is going to be picky. He's going to be there's going to be specific things that they want. I think you got to like some of the talent that they've added on the defensive side of the ball. I think that secondary is positioned to be much better next year than it was the past couple of years. I think you got to like what they've done among the offensive line in terms of trying to add some depth and some versatility, because you understand that injuries are going to happen and you got to be able to overcome it. So I think you got to it feels like everything they did was calculated, right? They went in with the plan of what they wanted to add in terms of what they wanted and then what they needed. Some of these guys are just going to be bodies that they needed to add so they can compete and practice at the highest level. But there's still value in that. So, did we get the big 2-3 transfers that maybe we all thought we were going to get when he got hired? Maybe not. But I still think, all things considered, considering when he got hired in relation to the portal being open and all the negative recruiting that was being done on the recruiting trail and in the portal, you've got to be satisfied with the job that he and Michael Lombardi and the player personnel staff have done, because I think they did enough to add some talent and add some depth to the roster for this team to be competitive in 2025.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the big names, I will say Price Yates is a big name. I mean, 12 sacks, 29 tackles for loss in your career. That's a legitimate player. That's a guy that wrecked shop against Carolina, and I think will probably have a chance to really succeed with all the experience that he has behind him. Thaddeus Dixon, legitimate shutdown corner on the outside, or at least number one corner. I think can build upon the type of play that we saw from Elijah Huzzie this year on the outside, which was pretty solid. If he can be better than that, then you're talking about a guy that can really take away a half of the field. And then it's just about figuring out that other side. Does Marcus Allen take a step? Is Ty Adams the guy that potentially emerges? Something like that. And then, Daniel King is ranked really high on that offensive line. I'm really high on Chad Lindbergh. I think he, just judging off of what he did at Rice, and I get it, man. Rice, not necessarily a great team, but he was a guy that didn't allow a sack there last year. Looked a part of a guy that was once playing in the SEC. And we saw what happened when we went and got a guy that came from Georgia that hadn't really played much, and you were wondering, would he live up to expectations? Austin Blasky did that. That, to me, is the only guy on the offensive line that's guaranteed to start. All the other guys that are coming in, all these other 5 guys that Carolina's gotten out of the portal, all of them have a legitimate chance to start, I think, because look, loved what we saw from Aiden Banfield, but I don't know if this staff values him that same way right off the bat. I think they'll get there, but it may be, hey, you're still a young guy. We're probably going to start so-and-so over you to begin the season, and we'll see, and we'll use you rotationally. Same thing with Trevion Green. Man, I'm going to tell you right now, there is absolutely no chance that dude's starting at tackle. I don't see it. I think the fact that they went out and got as many tackles as they did means that they're probably going to kick him inside. You saw they did that in the bowl game. And that was Freddie Kitchens and that staff. Now, that could have been something that was directed by Belichick and Lombardi that said, hey, try him inside. Let's see what we got. But I wouldn't be shocked if he doesn't start either. So there's going to be a lot of changes here. There's going to be a lot of guys that are going to be playing bigger roles than you probably realize. And so it'll be really interesting to see. And I mean, I didn't even mention Kamori House, who, judging off of which site you go by, was the top guy that Carolina landed in the transfer portal and should start at linebacker. So there are a lot of guys that I think have the chance to be very impactful for Carolina. One guy that will not is 3-star edge rusher Camden Laudenschlager, who said on Twitter earlier today that he will not enroll and will instead head elsewhere. Basically, he said this is part of the coaching change. He originally signed with Carolina. Remember, during the early signing period, Carolina did not have a head coach at that time. And that's why you saw guys like Bryce Baker, Austin Alexander take their time in, making their official decisions. Loudenschlager was one of those guys that signed right away. So he was just trying to make sure that he got his spot. And then if he felt like the coaching hire was not for him, or if the coach that came in said that, frankly, you're just not good enough to stick around here, that he would at least have his opportunity. And now it looks like he's moving on. I would believe probably more of a mutual parting of ways, one of the lower ranked prospects in the class. Also for him, moved around this year. It went from being an edge rusher, a position where I think he shined, to linebacker, where he wasn't bad there, but you could tell that he was a little out of sorts, was very, very stiff when having to drop into coverage. And so Carolina ends up losing him. Now, Carolina adds 3 guys to their 2025 class since the last time that we talked to you. Last time we talked to you, Chinadu Onyegoro was the guy that Carolina had added at edge rusher. And, that's a guy that is still standing up at this time. Probably one of the reasons why Loudenschlager is leaving and going elsewhere as well. Since then, Carolina's added 3 more. They've gone and got a quarterback in Arturi Newkirk. They've gotten a kicker in Gaetano Bartholomew, and then they've gone and gotten a defensive lineman. They actually landed him earlier today, Nico Maggio, who flips from Wake Forest. So first of all, when it comes to Newkirk, he's a guy that I think really just got lost in this recruiting class. Good player. I think you look at how successful he's been in the state of Virginia. Kid hasn't lost as a starter. He took over as the starter last year at Maury High School. And since that point, they have not lost a game. He's won back-to-back state titles. He has been tremendous. He scored 114 total touchdowns, totaled over 8,600 yards of total offense. He is a guy that has the ability and has just really been lost because of the fact that he is a lefty. And that means that his delivery is a little funky. They've been working on that with him. It looked a lot better this year on tape, but there's a lot to like. Big arm, really like his running ability. I think there's good mobility there. Ran for at least 600 yards in both seasons. So he's a guy that makes sense why Carolina is taking a flyer on him. Bartholomew, guy that has a pretty decent leg. I think this is just one that Carolina really wants to add to the battle, just to make sure that, one, they have a lot of depth on the roster at that position in case there's injuries or in case guys struggle that much. And 2, I think they also, truly believe that this is a legitimate open battle, and they want to try to add as many guys to it just to get a look at all of these different guys and see if someone really steps up out of the group. Maggio is the guy that committed today, and I really like a lot of what we see from him. Now, the thing about him is that I don't know how much upside is really there. I think the player that he is now is kind of the player that he's going to be. Love the physicality at the line of scrimmage, very physical, able to shake off blockers pretty easily. And I mean, when you're playing at the level that he's playing, he's from Buford High School, out there in Buford, Georgia. That's the top level in the state of Georgia. So he's really good. That if he's making an impact in games like that, he's playing some of the best offensive linemen in the entire country that he's going up against, and he's succeeding the way that he was. This past year, 40 total tackles, 10 tackles for loss, 4.5 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, 2 fumble recoveries, had an interception. He does pretty much everything for them out of the defensive tackle spot. So this is a guy that I think Carolina's taken a flyer on, but I think, the upside for him, where he can probably reach, is at least a part of the rotation, if not just a run stopper. To me, he almost reminds me a little bit of what you had with Ray Vohasek. I think, he's probably going to have to put on a little bit of size at 6'2", 280, but I really do like what he brings to the table. In terms of what it ultimately means, the guys that they're bringing in, I think with Maggio coming in and the fact that they've now landed 2 guys at defensive line since the new staff came in, This probably means that if they're going to take another transfer, it would only be one at the defensive line spot. It's not ideal, but I think they're going to roll with Mims and then a lot of the young guys, and they're hoping they can maybe add another veteran there after spring practice if there is a big name that enters the portal, or if they think that they don't that they don't like what they see. Remember, Carolina did this last year when they added Joshua Harris after spring practice. The biggest thing, and the thing that I wanted to ask you, is the quarterback spot. With them bringing in Newkirk, that means that Carolina now back up to 4 scholarship quarterbacks. Do you think that this means that the team is done adding at quarterback outside of maybe, the crazy scenario that Quinn Ewers says, you know what, I'm not liking what I'm hearing, I'm backing out, and a name like that is available?
Yeah, that would be the only scenario I see Carolina going and finding wanting to add another quarterback to the roster. Now they're back up to 4. You've got talent. More importantly, you've got depth in that room, which is not something that you had back when Mac Brown got fired, and you knew that there was going to be, you knew you were going to lose Connor Harrell. You knew that you were probably going to lose, Merdinger. Jacoby was always a guy up in the air. Of course, he ends up going away. So I would think that they're done. I think the room now is in a good spot for the short term and for the long term. But if Quinn Ewers decides to pull a Carson Beck and wants to return to school, then I could see a situation where Carolina gets involved. Maybe Quinn Ewers' girlfriend, enters the portal and goes to Carolina, and that persuades her decision. I don't know. Wouldn't be against it. So, so that would be there's not another move out there, I think, that would get Bill Belichick's interest to go add another quarterback to the roster. Like a bunch of the big name quarterbacks, like Drew Aller going back to Penn State, Cade Klubnik going back to Clemson. And even some of the hot commodity names have already found new homes that Carolina, unless they literally tampered with, could not get those guys to leave their program unless they did so after spring practice. So it looks like Carolina is done for right now. I think the staff did a really good job once they got put in place. Getting the commitment of Bryce Baker, the most important thing, but putting enough talent and depth in that room in case they were to go through some of the injuries that they went through this past year, they've got enough bodies on the roster to keep themselves upright.
I'm looking up Quinn Ewers' girlfriend here to see if there's any chance. I believe she is okay. She's 21 years old. She hails from Dallas. I don't think it's going to work out. I don't think we're going to be able to get her to transfer. But regardless, if he was to come back, I think we've seen that Texas is not. They're looking to move on. Do I think it's the smartest thing? No, because we don't know what exactly they are getting in Arch Manning. Is he a superstar? We have no clue. Because the limited time that we did see him, he didn't look like a superstar. He looked fine, but he didn't look like he was the next stud that was just being held back by this coaching staff not playing him. So I think he would be available. The thing I will say on the possibility of that happening, Carson Beck almost immediately pulled his name out of the draft. He went in, immediately pulls out, enters the portal, and ends up at Miami. You're not seeing the same thing with Ewers. Ewers has been in for a while now. I think it would take a drastic change where basically someone just comes right out and says that it's basically just not going to happen, that you're not going to make it to the NFL, which I don't think that's the case. I think there's enough room for him to potentially be a day 2 pick, early day 3 at the latest. So I think you're right. I think Carolina probably is done at that spot. Well, the 2025 class isn't the only spot where Carolina has been adding guys. Told you the last time on the that I was on the edition of the podcast that I did, that Carolina had landed 2 commitments out of the state of California in the 2026 class. Well, they've added a 3rd as well. So as you guys know, Carolina already landed Marcellus Ryan and Justin Lewis, 2 cornerbacks. And now they have 3-star athlete Jaden Jefferson as well. It's a guy that probably projects to the offensive side of the ball. Although I will be honest with you, watching his tape, first of all, didn't catch a lot of passes. So the fact that they want to put him in the slot, I think is interesting. He has caught single-digit passes. I mean, you got to think, kid's a junior. He's caught single-digit passes in each of his 3 seasons. They use him more as a running back, and they use him as a nickel corner. I think that's probably where they need to use him the most. I think that would be the perfect spot for him. I mean, very small guy at 5'9". I think he's around like 150, 155. But that would be a perfect nickel corner. There's a lot that I like about his game from that perspective. But here's the thing about all these guys. And you've got Carolina in the top 10 for 2026 4-star safety Aiden Pouncey as well. All of these guys are connected to Armand Hawkins, the defensive backs coach. And I think out of all the hires that were made, there are a lot of people that are questioning whether or not this was the right hire. He was a young guy. He's a defensive, he was a defensive back assistant at Washington. He was not their defensive backs coach. And yet Carolina brings him in, makes him the defensive backs coach. And I think people at the time were very concerned. I think he is easing all of those concerns. When you're making the waves that you are for North Carolina in the state of California, you've landed 3 guys that are inside the top 550 in the 2026 class out of the most talent-rich state in the country. I think this pretty much tells you that you've got yourself a gem. He's at least going to recruit at a very high level, and I think he needs to be given the opportunity to prove himself as a young coach. I get it that it's a little bit scary, that some people wanted a more veteran guy, probably someone from the NFL. But I think this is part of what happens when you're putting together a staff and you're trying to mix and match the pro and college games. I think you got to take a risk on a guy like this. And from what we're seeing so far, this dude is doing some amazing work and getting Carolina a pipeline to a spot in the country that would allow them to get to that national level that they want to be on.
Yeah, I think not that what he does coaching on the field is secondary, but this was a recruiting move by Bill Belichick. Like when the hire got made, the people in the industry that cover these types of things talked about how impactful he had been recruiting for Washington. And helping build up their talent level. And now you're getting that guy in your program. And I think with a coach like Bill Belichick, you want to recruit nationally. Yes, we want to keep the best players in state in Carolina. And I think we're going to get back to doing that. But when you look at the way that championship programs recruit, yes, they dominate their in-state recruiting, Ohio State, Georgia, Bama. But they have the ability to go to the other places of the country where there's so much talent that they can add to their roster. And that's what Carolina right now has at their disposal. And I think the success you've seen has been twofold. I think A, it's the hire that Carolina made. And then B, I think, once Belichick signed the contract and, you don't have former alumni writing hit articles about if he wants to coach the program or not, it does make it easier for these kids to buy in and commit to him. Because as long as you have people like Jonathan Jones writing articles about the guy maybe not being committed, it's going to impact these kids' decision. Well, now he signed his contract. I think that's alleviated a lot of concerns. He's putting more and more guys on his staff to be here for the long haul, and now he's building this thing up like he said he was going to. So you got to love that move from a recruiting standpoint, and expect this to continue, I think, over the next week or so, where I think that 2026 class is really going to get off the ground and get rolling because Belichick and his staff, they mean business.
They do. And let's talk about that staff really quick before we get out of here. First of all, I mean, you just run through the staff. I'll run through it here really quickly. Remember, the only ones even to this point that are official are Belichick and Lombardi, the GM. Those are the only ones right now. And I don't know. I don't know if they're going to make these official. It seems like every other program in the country usually puts out graphics when guys become official. But at this point, I have no idea. These guys may just officially be a part of the staff, and They've said, look, we don't want to put out graphics for these guys. They're assistants. They don't need them. I have no idea. But as it stands right now, what we're expecting is that Bill Belichick's going to be your head coach. Freddie Kitchens is going to be your offensive coordinator. Stephen Belichick's going to be your defensive coordinator. Matt Lombardi will be your quarterback's coach. Billy Miller will be a special teams assistant. Chris Jones will be a defensive assistant. Armand Hawkins is going to be your defensive backs coach. Will Friend is going to be your offensive line coach. Mike Preffier is going to be your special teams coordinator. Garrick McGee is going to be your wide receivers coach. Bob Diaco is going to be your linebackers coach, and Ty Nichols is going to be a defensive assistant. The training staff, you'll have Moses Cabrera as the strength and conditioning director. Amber Reinstein-Reza is expected to stay on as the director of nutrition. The front office, you'll have Michael Lombardi, the general manager. Andrew Blaylock, player personnel. Joe O'Neill, player personnel. Corey Giddings, player personnel. Chris Mattis, player personnel. Francie Jourdain, player personnel. And then Nick Appel is going to stay on as the director of high school relations. So Carolina, that's the staff that they have as of right now. And we got into this conversation. It was me and somebody on Facebook when I put up one of the articles. And he said that he was not really satisfied with the staff. He thought that there wasn't enough NFL flavor on the staff. What do you think about that notion? Because I think that people are absolutely insane if they believe that you could put together a much better staff than this. He told me that one of the big issues that he had was that we were not getting anybody from the teams that were still in the that were still playing as of divisional weekend. I'm here to tell you there is absolutely no chance that somebody that has a secure job as a position coach, as a coordinator on those teams is leaving an NFL role like that to come down and coach for Bill Belichick on a college staff. It's just not going to happen unless they have that deep of ties to him. I just don't think it is possible. And so I think that you've got some guys that, yeah, maybe they, were towards the end of their careers in the NFL or whatever. They are still incredibly valuable to this staff. And I think that this staff is coming together very nicely and it is one that Tar Heel fans should be pretty excited about.
Yeah, if you're a Carolina fan that's complaining about his staff, then you just want to complain and be miserable. Just that simple. I think he has a nice blend of college guys and NFL guys. I think it has there's a nice blend of experience at both levels, and I think you've got certain hires at certain positions that I think will be game changers, like the Bob Diaco, the Bob Diaco hire they made this week. Love that hire. I think that's a hire that. Like, is Carolina making that hire under Mac Brown? I don't think so. So, am I sold on Freddie Kitchens being a great offensive coordinator? I'm not. That's something that's going to have to be determined. I've seen his son coach at the NFL level and the college level. His son can coach. And he might sit there and stick his tongue out and lick his snot as it comes out of his nose when it gets cold, but that's a football guy. That guy can coach. Carolina's going to be, I think, from a technique standpoint and a fundamental standpoint, as good as they've been on that side of the ball in quite some time. So, again, I think, we maybe got caught up in the fact that he was going to put together this all-star name staff as opposed, and that's what Carolina fans wanted in terms of putting together the best staff. But I think he surrounded himself with guys he's familiar with, which is important considering that he's going to a game that's foreign to him, and guys that have experience at coaching at the college game, which will ease his adjustment to just how things work. Because it is a different game. It flows differently. You do some stuff schematically that's a little bit different because it's not as advanced as what he does or what he's done in the NFL. So I like the staff. I approve of the staff. I think he made the most of the money he was given to put together the best staff possible. And I think, if Carolina is good this year and they're competitive, It'll be the fact that he put the right coaches on his staff to coach and develop up the talent, which was probably the biggest sin of Mac Brown's coaching tenure, was that he did not develop talent the way he should have with the way that he recruited his first 4 years on campus.
Well, the hire of Diaco, I think, is great in so many ways. Remember that he was an incredibly successful defensive coordinator. And so for a guy like Stephen Belichick to have somebody that thrived and was, the architect of one of the better defenses that we have ever seen in the modern era of college football when he was at Notre Dame in that 2012 season, for him to be able to be there and yes, develop the guys that are there at the linebacker spot, but also to be a sounding board, to be someone that can help Stephen Belichick, continue to move forward as a coach. I think that's huge. I think that is massive. Offensively, yeah, not the biggest fan of Freddie Kitchens being your offensive coordinator, but here's the thing. If it doesn't work out, you got another young mind in Matt Lombardi that could eventually be the guy that ascends there. And everybody's going to say, well, why are you saying that? You think that's a move they're going to make because of nepotism? No, I really don't. This is a guy that was incredibly well regarded with Oregon. He did a great job of developing their quarterbacks. I mean, did you see how good Dylan Gabriel looked this year? I think that he could get a lot out of the offensive side of the ball, and he's probably heading towards being a play caller at some point somewhere. So that's always an option. That's the thing you like about this group that Carolina has. And there's guys that have a ton of experience at all different levels. I mean, look at a guy like Chris Gray. That's a dude that is coached or Chris Jones, got it mixed up. I was thinking of the Grey Cup. You've got coaching experience at the college level, the NFL level, and at the CFL level. He's been all over. He's seen a ton of different guys. He's played in a ton of different leagues and has all this experience as a head coach, as a defensive coordinator, as a position coach on the defensive side of the ball. So it's guys like that I think are really going to help Carolina out a ton. And I really like the blend that they have with that. And then a guy like Armand Hawkins, like I said, that's young, that I think is going to have a chance to, completely overhaul this secondary from what it was last year. I really think that this is a great staff that he has put together. One other guy that I forgot to mention in there, and I noticed this the other day when a running back was offered in the 2028 class. I do believe, and there's nothing confirming this, so I'm not putting out an article, anything on it just yet. I believe that Larry Porter is staying on as the team's running backs coach. The reason I say that is he was tagged in that tweet when the offer was handed out. You could say, okay, well, maybe he's still in place until, Belichick ultimately gets his running backs coach. Could be. That could certainly be the case. But I do think it's a little weird that he would still be handing out offers at this point, that it wouldn't be coming from just Lombardi or just Belichick. So I think there's a chance if there's one guy that's going to be a holdover. I told you, to me, there were two acceptable guys to be holdovers from this previous staff. Maybe three if you count Tommy Thigpen, if he would have been the linebackers coach. Larry Porter and Lonnie Galloway. Everybody else on the staff, I thought, probably time to move on. They're not keeping Galloway, but I think there is a chance that they could be keeping Larry Porter. If they make that official or any other news around the program, you will find it on the website, HeelToughBlog.com. Guys, there are a ton of articles up there. I gave you a slight breakdown of Nico Maggio. You want to go and read about this young man, an in-depth look. I break down his film, tell you what I see on there that I like, what I see on there that he needs to improve on. All of that stuff, you can check that out, along with the same type of articles for Bartholomew, the kicker, and Newkirk, the quarterback. You can check out all of that stuff on the website. Same thing for the guys in the 2026 class. You'll see those articles there as well. We also have the article about Bill Belichick signing his contract. Go through, read all the specifics, including photos of some of the incentives that he has in his contract. There is a huge list of them that you guys are going to want to check out that should excite you if you're a Tar Heel fan, because really they start at getting to 9 wins. There's also a couple of bowl games in there that I think are really, really interesting, that he will get extra time or extra money on if Carolina ends up making it to those bowl games. So that article is up there. And then articles on the season opener, the conference opener, all of that stuff. And we'll have you covered on Monday night when the official schedule is released. So much going on around Tar Heel football. So you want to make sure that you check the page every morning, afternoon, and evening. And then at the same time, you want to check to make sure that there isn't any basketball news. Guys, massive commitment for Carolina on the 2025 recruiting trail on the basketball side of things. Caleb Wilson ends up committing to the Tar Heels late last night on Inside the NBA. Josh has an article up there about him and why that is such a big addition for Carolina, who was needing a big name in that class to sort of quill some of the doubters of Hubert Davis on the recruiting trail. They did exactly that. So read that. And then, of course, read the preview and recap of every game that Carolina plays. Big game coming up on Saturday for them to hopefully get going in the right direction once again against Boston College. Josh will have you covered on that front. And, of course, we have you covered on the Four Corners podcast all throughout the year. Best way to not miss any of the stuff that we just talked about, just go to the Heel Tough Blog Twitter page. All you got to do, X page if you want to call it that, but I refuse to call it that outside of when I'm promoting it. You go over, check out that page. All you got to do, follow, and then hit the little button that's next to it with the bell that turns on the notifications. All you got to do is turn on all notifications, and you will get notified anytime that we put out an article. So anytime there's news, anytime we're putting out an opinion article, anytime we're putting out a podcast, all of that stuff is on there, and it'll be sent right to you as a notification on Twitter. So make sure you do that. That's the best way to keep up with all of our stuff. So that once again wraps it up for this edition of the podcast. I want to thank Josh for hosting with me. I want to thank you guys for watching and listening. And as always, go Tar Heels.